No one can make me go back but God. I'm not proud right now. I'm not proud to be Nigerian.
Jeez.
I'm not. I'm disappointed.
Ooh.
As I reflect on this conversation I had with my friend Bex about my dad, her dad, and really just continuing the conversation we've been having, I think about a few things, like the man my father was. My father, a Nigerian man who found his way to America, obtained his education with 3 degrees, later 4, worked as a social worker for most of his career, and a natural-born leader. Oldest of 20-plus kids, and a founder and former president of a few organizations. A man who seemed to have it all, or maybe all of it, weighing on his shoulders. The second thing I think about as I reflect on this conversation is, if I'm a little honest, I get a little nervous to have this conversation. Nervous about the what ifs. But then I'm reminded how the what ifs of the past crippled me in fear before. And how that very same fear in me may have been in my dad. Which is the very frustration and revelation I'm having about him and tradition.
And I remember the heaviness of that shift, but I didn't understand it because you weren't articulating that this is what you were going through. So now it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like, it's so layered.
I can tell.
This is super layered. There's so much to speak to.
This process was and is very layered.
I think any person who is Nigerian who has to bury someone or they have to go through the funeral process, especially a parent, I think anybody watching this who is Nigerian will understand and relate that it's just a lot, just in general.
I can't stress enough that it just feels like when you bury someone, it's a lot already on its own. You're grieving, but you have to make arrangements. It's just like, this is not a convenient time to really do this. I need to kind of like process. And most people don't. Like, we're in an age where we're finally doing that, right? But I feel like the extra layer is being Nigerian. Not only is burying someone you love a lot of work, being Nigerian and burying someone you love is even more work, it seems. And on top of that, providing space for those who knew and loved him here in America is a lot. We prepared for 4 events in total. We had the memorial service in Portland, Oregon at his alma mater, University of Portland. And then we had a 3-day funeral in Nigeria. The journey involved so much. I had to go to DC to get my Nigerian passport renewed.
The Nigerian embassy in DC to gain my Nigerian passport.
Honestly, that's a whole nother story on its own. I wish it was only as simple as, okay, let me pick the coffin, let's pick the church, let's hire the pastor, send out the invites, cry. No, it was so much more. Long nights on international phone calls for weeks at a time with family overseas. Making decisions you think the loved one would prefer versus what other people would prefer. And then not having a job. So you're really not sure how you're going to pay for any of this. Like I said, I have to pay for a passport. I have to buy a plane ticket. We have to pay for multiple venues. And then there's trying not to focus on people who are starting to look like they have hidden motives. Not to mention when chaos starts in the family because family secrets start to drop. This process truly was a lot.
Minimum 3 days, minimum 5 days, like just going through all of that, and then having to like have conversations with people back in Nigeria, and just the the communication back and forth, late nights, all of that. So that in itself is a layer, and that in itself is a lot. But then there's also the layer of, again, learning who he was and having to process that.
Yeah.
And then going through my own stuff. Like I was going through a lot, to be perfectly transparent, on unemployment, trying to figure out, like, I'm doing interviews in the process, trying to figure out my next job. And then also learning new skills about myself. So there's a lot of layers. But I think why I want to have this conversation is because I've learned a lot about grieving my father.
Yeah.
And I don't know that everybody's going to be happy with what I have to say, but I do believe it needs to be said.
Yeah.
So,
bravery is something I've been working on. And this very vlogumentary is me outwardly working on that bravery. Because I'd be a hypocrite if I point out an issue in a person or a group of people and not take out the plank in my own eye. I think my dad came to a similar decision of bravery, but possibly tossed back and forth like myself when standing his ground. I think his back and forth from brave to fear happened a lot in the States and on U.S. soil.
he did a lot. He really was an amazing guy. And, like, comma. And he also, I think has some personal demons that ruined some relationships and things like that. So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So he came to America. How old were you? How old was he?
He came before we were born. So he came when he was like 19 or 20.
Oh.
They met my mom in college.
Okay.
And apparently pursued the mess out of her.
Okay.
Kind of wouldn't leave her alone. And they fell in love and had my brother, got married, and had the rest of us.
And that was in the 80s?
That was in the 70s.
Okay.
I think.
So, Nigerian man, immigrant in America in the 70s. I can only imagine what that experience was like.
Yeah. I think at the time you might not know it, but he might not have known it at the time, but he was very much a traveler. And there was a lot of things ignited in him already. And then I think coming to America and then being exposed to certain things, and then it just, again, it ignited what was already there. And I think that might be also some things that he kind of faced.
Yeah.
It's like something like, I use the word crossroad, and we can come back to this later, but crossroad is like a theme that I feel like I keep sensing with my dad, even before he passed, but especially since he passed.
Yeah.
It's interesting. My dad says that he Also wanted to bridge the gap between Africans and African Americans. Do I think he outwardly shared that? Maybe not. But I think that was something that was a part of him because of how much he loved America. Because I think he got very acclimated here. And it became his home. It was his home. And as his daughter, to me, it was very apparent that he was proud to be an American. That doesn't diminish that he's also proud to be Nigerian. But do I think that also creates questions that you might have of feeling kind of torn? What do I do? I found a home in a new place, but that doesn't mean I don't find home in my birthplace. So I think he wrestled with that. I think it's quite possible that he wrestled with that.
Already so many things just kind of perceptively that I'm picking up on that he must have been battling, because you mentioned these demons that he was fighting. Mm-hmm. So young Nigerian man comes to America, family still back home. We all know, no matter what your experience is or relation to like Nigerian family is, that can create some tension for those who are home and want to go abroad but can't. Then you have the spiritual wars that our parents were fighting from just generational ritual heritage things that were traveling through our bloodlines. So he's up against a lot. And then he's here in America where in the 70s, there's still racism. There's still so much
colorism, like even in our art and even in our own
man.
community.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pride as a young Black man, Nigerian man, to have achieved that. But there's still a lot of pain that he must have been facing, a lot of rejection that he must have been facing, a lot that he probably felt he had to prove. And I feel like that builds the texture of this conversation around Nigerian fathers and what they are up against.
Telling this story is important to me because I'm starting to see, or I'm starting to understand how hard it was for my father in the position that he was in. And in being my father and being the oldest of many siblings and being the son of a chief and being the son of a daughter of a chief, and all the different weight that was upon him and things that I don't even know. I feel like I'm seeing a perspective that maybe I hadn't saw before in terms of how hard it is to be a Nigerian man, how hard it is to be a Nigerian father, and just all of the different expectations that come with that. And I wish I would have had a little more grace for him. I wish I would have had a little bit more grace, if I'm honest. There were definitely times where I probably not had too much grace, because I don't know if that's a thing, but I think there were definitely times where I had a lot of grace, but then I got to that point as an adult where I'm like, we need answers. I want answers. Like, what is going on and why? But I think if I had arrived to the point where I didn't get the answers, being okay with just accepting him for who he is and then letting that mercy set back in to see, like, there might be a reason why you can't know the answers right now or never. I don't know. On this side of death, I'm recognizing, and I really do believe it's the Lord. I really do believe it's the Holy Spirit. I believe it's Christ showing me that there were some things beyond him that he could not control. And maybe the things that he could, maybe he didn't control them as well as he could have. But the things that he couldn't were pretty weighty. And I think some of that has to do with tradition.
Wow. So for those of our viewers who have a Nigerian dad, what do you want them to walk away with?
So, I want them to walk away with
yes, you're not the only one that has to go through all of this, all of the strife that comes with it. But for those who don't understand like the spirit realm or who may not be a Christian, um, that what is typically known as warfare is a real thing. And so if you're kind of experiencing again, not only the things of the natural of just like the logistics of the funeral and all the things, if you're kind of experiencing this other thing, like spiritually, or a lot of times we kind of just bottle it. Oh, it's just like you're grieving. Like people might just go, oh, it's just you're grieving. No, I do believe there are oppressions. There are spiritual things that are happening to you and to your family because of what happened before you even existed.
Yeah. Ooh, you are talking some big stuff right now.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is, and I'll say this as well, we are proud Nigerians. We love our culture. We are women who've always worn that proudly. And at the same time, we are women who have been on a journey of discovery and are realizing there's some aspects of our culture that are not as pleasant and were worthy of celebration as we maybe thought when we were younger.
Yep.
So what were those things that you discovered through this journey? And then we'll get into the story of his passing.
Yeah. I think some of the things that I noticed were things that are hard to describe.
Yeah.
It's going to be very hard to describe and convey to the public. But when you know, you know. If you know, you know, kind of a thing. Weird things happening.
So what I'm about to say is not easy to say, but I do feel like I'm supposed to say it. A lot of strange things happened in Nigeria. And I think if I were to say this to some Nigerians, they might kind of just chuck it up to normal, everyday Nigerian living. But y'all wasn't there. I just feel like a lot of sus things happen. One of them being the car all of a sudden breaking down. Like the timing and location, people disappearing and leaving from important engagements for hours at a time, thinking maybe we didn't notice, and then coming back. People taking my dad's DNA after it was agreed that it would go to the firstborn, and then quickly going off, and we never get it. These sorts of things, I think sometimes we think, oh, Nigeria is dysfunctional, this corruption. I'm starting to think it is by design. It's not just because we're just so held back in all these different things that I've heard my whole life. I'm not saying those things aren't there, but I'm starting to feel like a lot of the dysfunction is a distraction. And that's not even scratching the surface.
Well, let me back it up, because we knew he had the stroke and we were praying about this. We were praying for his recovery. I remember, you would schedule calls for us to get on Zoom and pray. I remember praying for him individually, on my own, just knowing like what you were experiencing. And I remember being in Nigeria as he was going through his recovery journey.
Yeah, that's right. That's
and
right.
We were still hopeful. We were still praying for a full turnaround. But I remember praying and sensing that there was a spiritual war going on, that there was something spiritual behind this. And yeah. Were you feeling that too? Like,
Absolutely.
what were your discoveries through your prayer journey while he was recovering from the stroke?
So the fact that I lost my job that I just got let me know something right there. I had just got a job, loved it. They loved me. And then I don't have it anymore. It was around the time that we were doing all the praying and everything. So that's what I mean by spiritual warfare, that some people might not label it as that. Like when you're doing a thing and then all of a sudden there's a switch or a change. That doesn't always mean spiritual warfare, but sometimes it's like, this doesn't make sense. Like, that's what just happened here? That's what I mean by spiritual warfare for those who aren't familiar. A lot of people don't know this, especially his family, but I spoke to him the day that he had his stroke. I called him because he was supposed to have a video conference with my now fiance. They had already spoken on the phone multiple times. So they already met. He was supposed to meet him on video call for the first time.
Oh my goodness.
So I called for that and he sounded kind of like preoccupied. At least that's what I thought. And so he was just, I said, hey dad, I'm calling so you can talk to, and he was like, yeah, okay. And I was like, well, it kind of sounds like you're busy though. You have people over. I mean, and then he said, well, yeah. Like, do you want to do this later? Yeah. Let's do this later. And then he said this, which my dad doesn't typically do. He said, yeah, my such and such is here with his son, and we're going over the land and we're talking about the land. I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting.
My dad doesn't talk to me about property and stuff like that. I mean, he talks about it, but he doesn't typically say, oh, such and such is here and we're doing this. He might say it later, like, oh yeah, we did this, but he doesn't. That was just very specific to me and detailed. And I think that was the Lord. Okay. He wanted me to have that information. And I also think maybe my dad wanted me to have that information.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
So that's that.
Interesting.
And then later that day, I was going to work. I was somewhere. I was in transition. I was driving, and I got a call, and a video call from someone that typically doesn't video call me. And they said, your dad, I don't know what's wrong. We're in the hospital.
So while I was driving, I got a phone call that I was not expecting, and I answered the call, and I was told that my dad was in the hospital, and it was a video call, and the video turned to him, and he was standing oddly. His body's a little deformed, and his eyes were really big and kind of bugged out, and so I think he was having his stroke right in front of me on live on the camera in Nigeria, or had just had one. I'm not sure, but as I was trying to talk to him, he couldn't even look into the camera. He just kept saying, yes, thank you, yes, Wese, thank you, over and over again. And in Benin, Wese means thank you. And so I think it's also interesting, this kind of theme that I feel like God has been showing me is that my dad was at a crossroads. Like I said, feeling like America's my home, Nigeria's my home. And then even in his speech, he was like, thank you, Wese. His brain, I feel like, was trying to decipher of what language to use. Oh wait, who am I talking to? Or oh wait, where am I? He was trying to respond on the video call. I'm driving in the car and on the freeway, and I actually started to hyperventilate, but was trying to keep myself calm, and I just told him, we're gonna get through this, I love you, let me call my brothers, I don't think that I And I don't know if it's a black thing or if it's a female thing or a little bit of both, but I don't think I recognize traumatic moments for traumatic moments. And looking back, that was a very traumatic moment to see my dad in that state. And to be driving at the same time and trying to like collect myself and like hold my emotion because I wanted to bawl, but I'm like, it's like it was as if I was trying to also coach myself, like, nope, calm down, don't get overwhelmed, okay, respond, okay, what do we do, okay, don't go over the speed limit, okay, don't slow down, there's a car, like, just literally a little frantic, but trying not to be. And so I think, yeah, just in all honesty, that was a very traumatic moment for me. Yeah. There were moments in various points of this process, from the time I got that call, when I just wanted everything to pause. There were people I could call on to help me breathe and process and pray. Bex was one of those people I could count on for prayer. Bex was also a daddy's girl. As the youngest of his girls, she was his princess. What I love about Bex is she always has an open ear. And when I felt like God wanted me to tell this story, he put her on my heart. As a life coach and so much more, I think she brings a listening ear and perspective that I needed to hear. That helped me and is helping me heal. It also helps that she happens to have a Nigerian father.
I have a similar experience. My dad got here in the 80s. My dad was deported in the 80s. And I think racism had to do with it. There's also some spiritual things that my mom believes had to do with it. He was raised Muslim and converted to Christianity. So there's a war there. His family, which was royalty back at home, didn't like that he had converted to Christianity, didn't like that he had married my mom, who was a Christian. And I think that there was a war spiritually to get him back. And, insert deportation.
Were they from the same tribe? So they both Yoruba or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Both Yoruba. My mom is Ijebu. My dad is Adodo.
Okay.
But different faiths in terms of like what they both grew up on. So there was definitely some tension there and a war that was going on there. And he was a proud Christian, always prayed. But this spiritual stuff is
no joke
to be messed with.
It's no joke.
And I think that we are the generation that's discovering our identity. I think that our parents,
which is a privilege,
were at a crossroad, like you said, where they were still taking pride in things that they weren't aware were sent to destroy us. And they were also taking pride in like these new opportunities on the horizon, like coming to America, all those different things. So there's like how do you stay grounded in your identity when you're here in America being taught this whole new way of life, one that you want to take pride in because there's a level of freedom that maybe you didn't have access to while being at home, but at the same time you're being rejected in this on this land. So you want to take pride in your culture, and that very culture is kind of working against you.
And then there's conflict. There's conflict, like what you're saying. There's conflict of being enlightened about things that you're like, well, maybe I don't like that anymore. Maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe you're fighting it. And I think it's possible that he did fight a lot of things that maybe his grandfather or my grandfather, his dad and his mom wanted. I know that they didn't necessarily favor my mom at first. I think I heard that they thought, oh, you're just going to marry a model. I don't know why, but they were like, oh, you're going to marry this American model. She's going to take all your money, da-da-da. And they met her because she moved to Nigeria and lived there for a little bit. And when they met her, they were like, oh, she's not like that at all.
Wow. So there's this bias and prejudice
that they don't even know,
that we just project based on very limited information, limited experiences. And I observe that so much. So I'm living in Nigeria, and it was the same thing. Oh, Americans this, Americans that. And I'm like, well, I don't this or that. My friends don't this or that. all you're basing that on is what the propaganda tells you, what the headlines tell you, what media tells you in very specifically curated, depictions of what it means to be American. And it's so unfortunate that a whole world of people with very limited experiences of the culture can create such narratives that cause them to resist the culture and thus project all of these, in some ways, curses on the culture, on the identities of the people. And words and thoughts are so powerful.
That right there is why I had an obsession with akata. Like, we're using a word that we don't even really know the definition to. What would frustrate me is when Nigerians would quiz me as soon as, your name. I remember I was working at Rite Aid my senior year at Morgan State. And so I have a name tag. I'm checking people out and they're like, your name. It's Nigerian. No? Oh, yeah, it's Nigerian. Yeah. In my mind, I've been through this my whole life. So I usually, either I put a wall up, I get defensive, I don't allow you to take me through this journey, or I give in. I'm just like, all right, I'll appease you, and I know you're about to quiz me and vet me. What does your name mean? Do you know your name? Is your mommy and your daddy? Where are they from? Which village are they from? Do you speak your language? Have you been back home? And it's just like this constant proving. Yeah. And so for a long time, I thought I was fighting against proving my Nigerianness to Nigerians. Yeah. When really, and someone asked me, like, I feel like you're like identity searching. And I was like, no, I'm not. I know who I am. People want to put me in a box. I'm not. I'm not just Nigerian. I'm not African American. I'm both. I would always say that. And I still feel that. But I do, like I said, through the process of transitioning Akata to Unpopulr, I do think that I was trying to prove myself to my dad, prove my Nigerianness to my dad, which now, and I know we can get into it later, but which now I'm like, for what?
Ooh.
For what?
How do you get to that point?
After everything that we went through, everything that me and my brother had to go through, with my dad's funeral process, the grieving, all of it, tradition or not, a lot of it was just like, what? For what? That's one. Two, it's not like it was my first time in Nigeria, but to step off of a plane and also let me preface this before I even get into that. I have always been one to be very positive about Nigeria. We have enough negative conversations, or at least we did.
Yeah.
But we're kind of, making a move. I feel like when it comes to a few things, maybe music, Afrobeats, things like that, like whatever.
Yeah.
Or Nigerian Americans making a name for themselves in different creative fields, right? That's what I mean.
I mean,
but
plenty to be proud of.
Plenty to be proud of.
Very proud. We both are.
But then there's a piece of me that's just like, I don't know that I am anymore. And I don't know if that's just my grief talking.
Because we get underneath.
But I'm going to be honest, but I'm just like, congratulations for that one person. It's kind of like, yay, yay for a LeBron, or yay for like a Oprah, yay for a WizKid, yay for a Davido. But the majority, but what's going on with the citizens there? Like, what frustrated me is I'm getting off of a plane and you're just always kind of met with, my sister, that's really small, And I've always been very like understanding. It's like, but because they're going through and the government is corrupt, because that's what I was taught. My dad would always say, God, the government is just corrupt. So it's like, you're told to go back home, but then you're scared to go back home because of all the things. So I don't, between what I experience with family and what I experience with people I don't even know in Nigeria, there's a piece of me that's just like, what is there to be proud of if people are still in this crab, bottom of the barrel crab mentality? Like, I get why. And I know people gonna be like, why should, I get why. I'm like past the why now. Like, I'm just kind of beyond that.
But for those who don't know the why, what is the why?
I mean, the government is corrupt. There is a lot of greed. And so the resources that are there aren't going to the people that they're supposed to go to. And they're being stifled and held hostage, quite frankly, amongst leaders.
Yeah.
That's the surface side, and that's the natural side. Then there's the spiritual side.
Exactly.
Which is a whole other thing. That's the warfare side.
Yeah. I think it gets deeper than we can even get into.
It is.
In this conversation.
It is. It's deeper than we even
best.
know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my observation has been that, like you said, there's this natural, worldly, I guess, aspect of it that we can see, the corruption, the greed, and things like that. But based on my discovery, because I went back and I lived there for a year for this very intention, I feel like God sent me there because I was already on a journey to combat fear in my life, combat identity gaps. I'm living in Baltimore. I'm somewhat thriving in Baltimore, but there's still this like resistance and this stagnance that I feel and I don't quite understand. And then everything kind of comes to a standstill in 2020 and I just leave. In 2021, I moved to Costa Rica. I spent a whole year there trying to grieve and heal from a very traumatic experience that I had. And as I come to the other side of that healing process, I felt like God was like, okay, now we got to go deal with and heal from some other stuff. We're going to Nigeria. And so naturally my family is like, why? What are you doing? I mean, when I went to Costa Rica, I didn't tell anybody because I knew that they would be like, why? What are you doing? And I knew that it was a very personal journey. I was somewhat quiet about Nigeria, in the same way that I was about Costa Rica. My mom didn't know I was in Costa Rica for the first 3 months that I was there. My siblings didn't know about it right away. But with Nigeria, I knew that I was going to need somewhere to stay. I got family there. So I had to tell people. And I mean, the fear. Oh, you're going to get kidnapped, exploited, mutilated, all this stuff. Why would you want to go there right now? The political climate is too dangerous, this, and that. There's about to be an election. You're crazy, all this other stuff. And for me, I'm just like, I don't know why God wants me to go there. But
he does.
One thing I'm going to do is listen when he calls me. And it was so supernatural, like the confirmation that he gave me that I should go. And I won't get into that. But I went. And I was like, oh, this isn't just about me. There's a very complex spiritual scheme that's going on here. And when I left Baltimore, God gave me that clarity. He said, I want you to pull away from this city so you can see this oppression, the spirit of murder, the spirit of malice, the spirit of greed, the spirit of corruption, Baltimore City specifically, some stuff going on in DC as well. So he used my experience in Baltimore and pulling me away to kind of discern it and see things that were happening to build that gift so that when I was in Nigeria, I could see things very plainly for what they were. Visions about political leaders, all types of stuff. Now, let me fast forward to where I am now based on that discovery and that journey, because I learned a lot of things about my family, our bloodline, our family dynamic, and then like my dad. So my dad, like I mentioned earlier, was deported when I was 4. So, came in the 80s. He was here for 10 years before he left. So he might have been like late 70s when he came, but he was deported before, like by 89, I believe. 90. Yeah. So fast forward to when I'm 19, 21, he passed away. They had the whole procession and things like that, but we were very far removed from it. I think at that point, my mom was kind of over all of the oppression that was going on that led to him, being deported. But also, she just kept us at a distance because she wanted to protect us. Yeah. She protected us from a lot. And we didn't come to know of it until later in our 20s when we started to ask questions. But she protected us because she knew what was going on and she didn't want us to have to deal with any of that stuff. Wise woman, my mom. But nevertheless, I get there and she, in her wanting to protect me from it, she's just like, don't talk to these people. Please don't go here. Please don't do this. And my curiosity is just like, my curiosity and also my boldness for the Lord. God is protecting me. So I'm going to go wherever I want. I'm going to talk to whoever I want. They're not going to be able to do nothing to me. And so what I'm trying to say is this whole spiritual thing, it's layered. It's based on emotions of people that are hurt, that then open doors to bondage and strongholds and footholds because of that hurt. Now that hurt turns to malice, and now you're projecting negative things toward people. And then there's some people that go outrightly and do things against people, you know, in the traditional sense, you know, going to see witch doctors and things like that.
Yep.
But it's happening at multiple layers. It's a very complex thing. And then there's this collective energy as well, this collective power of a sentiment can be held by hundreds of thousands of people that can then turn into a curse that is perpetuated through our culture, etc. So it's not just one thing that's happening here. There's so many different layers of it, and that's still scratching the surface.
Right. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yep. All that, everything that you just said.
And so
Everything
this
that you just said.
conversation is because as we're learning it, and as others are learning it, you know, our viewers are probably going through these journeys themselves. I feel like God just wants us to all know. And I also feel like God bless our Nigerian fathers. They were up against a lot, are up against a lot. And I think so much of the mental outcome and the emotional breakdown and the depression and the shame, etc., is because they, as much as we feel like we are the repairers of the breach, as much as we feel like we are the ones breaking the generational curses, it almost feels like they were in the gap.
Yeah, no, for sure.
For us.
For sure.
And if
they were the
had
first
not
ones to cross that
fought,
line.
yeah, the way that they fought, as harmful as some of the things might have been, they were fighting so that we could have a little bit more freedom. And in that little bit more freedom that we have, we're able to fight an even better fight, or I guess a more
hopeful fight, stronger fight. Yeah, I see where you're going.
I don't know if we even can come up with the words. Maybe our audience can tell us in the comments. But there's a different type of fight happening with our generation. And I think it's just so important that we honor the fight that they fought. I know I went through my journey and I had a lot of resentment, even hatred for the culture, for the elders. But God had to take me on a journey to the other side of that to realize that they were doing the best that they could with what they had. And a lot of their lack of awareness made it such that it wasn't fought the way that it, and we get to have this awareness now. And why they didn't get to have the awareness, I'm not sure. Maybe it was just not yet time in the journey. Maybe there was just still too much. And so thank God that we have a little bit less to fight against and more clarity and more awareness so that the fight is a little bit easier. Painful as it might be still, I feel like our fight is a little bit easier than what our parents had to go through. And I respect and honor them for that. As much as respect and honor early in this journey was like completely absent for me. I was just like, I don't respect it. I don't want no parts of it. But you know, I think this conversation is important because there's a lot of us that are in different stages of our journey. I think you are in your grief journey. And so in my grief journey, I have felt all types of things on the other side of it, which thank God for how he uses grief to help us evolve. I feel a little bit more at ease, a little bit more relieved. I'm able to see more of the positive in our culture and in my father and even in my stepfather, where I didn't before. Yeah.
When you speak to protection, I feel like me and my brother talk about that a lot. We know that our dad protected us from a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And the thing, you know, the thing is, people aren't, like I said, people are not going to necessarily like what I have to say. But I think for me, what I experienced is, I feel like I was exposed to something. I feel like I had a paradigm shift. I'm always, again, looking at Nigeria in this kind of positive light. I'm always looking at Nigeria like, oh, well, this is because of this, and this is because of this. And like I said, I'm just kind of getting past the why and like, so what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
And if we're not going to do anything about it, I'm not going to be a part of it unless God is saying so. So I know for a fact that, you know, before we went for the funeral, praying, fasting, all the things, and preparing for my journey, and the Lord made it very clear that this was an Esther moment for me.
Ooh.
And I was like, okay.
By Esther moment, I mean making and taking a stance for Christ, the God I serve, and not just for myself. No matter what I may face, no matter what the outcome is, no matter what people will think, just like Esther in the Bible. Before leaving for Nigeria, I made up in my mind that if I perish, I perish.
And I'll be honest, looking back, I kind of wish I didn't go. Like when some people tell me, oh, I had a similar experience, but I didn't have to go back. And now I'm like, I wish I just didn't go. I wish we just didn't go. I wish we would have just did what we could from here. Again, but that's where the honor comes from. Like, I'm going to honor my dad. Like, it wasn't even a question. Like, yeah, I'm going.
Yeah.
Like, of course, I'm going to go.
Not going to Nigeria wasn't an option for me. I was going to honor my dad and be obedient to my Heavenly Father. Like, I literally did not see not going as an option. But I'll be honest, when I got back, I wish I hadn't gone at all. I was so mentally drained. When my father was alive, I knew why I was going and who I could trust. But now, I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
But right now, I'm kind of like, I wish I hadn't, to be honest with you. That's where I'm at right now. And I remember talking to some Nigerian creatives, and we were talking about the elections at the time, I think. And I was like, I'm gonna tell you, like I tell my family back home, like, we can't let fear we can't let fear stop us. We have to stand united. That is what the government wants. That's what the enemy wants. The enemy uses the government. He wants us to not unite and fight back. And I was like, that's why I'm really glad to see what happened with SARS and with everything that happened with that generation, with this new generation that were like, we're not taking this anymore. And I do think that a lot of that was inspired by the African American community here in America, which is great. And I'm just like, yes, that's what we need more of. And I'm like trying to encourage people that I know in Nigeria that that's the kind of mentality that we need to have. And so I literally said to these other Nigerian creatives, like, they're like, yo, so you saying if you was in Nigeria, you would? I'm like, listen, I will be on the front lines. If God calls me to be on the front lines, I will be on the front lines. So similar to you, yes, bold, ready, because I know the God that I have. And here's the end. Here's the comma. That was pre my dad's death.
Ooh.
Now, I'll be honest, when we went, again, you first touch down, you just feel the warfare. I feel the warfare of just being misunderstood, just like the whole concept. And I had a conversation about this before, but like the whole concept about, because you're in America, like you said, there's a misunderstanding. Because you're in America, it equals you have. You don't go through struggle. You don't have any issues. And it's automatic that you're doing better. Well, it's like, well, it's gotta be better. And it's just like, there's pros and cons to living in America and Nigeria. Also, I don't live there, so I get that I have a bias in what I'm saying. I understand that, but it's just like, but they don't have mortgage. Like, there's certain things that they have access to that they have that we don't, and they're not utilizing it the way they should. I get the why. I understand that there's roadblocks and things in front. I really do. I'm kind of over it though. Like, we just we keep coming with this. We're so prideful. We're so smart. We can do this. We can do that. Then why the heck is majority of the nation so in poverty? I get that we have royalty. I'm not saying the images that we see of Nigerians and of Africans that the media is depicting, that is not all of Nigeria. Nigeria absolutely is royalty. Nigeria is absolutely coming from kings and queens, 100%. And, there's a lot of people living in shacks. There's a lot of people who are trying to leave. Tell me why. If Nigeria is a place that I'm supposed to be proud of, we're supposed to be proud. Go back home. You have to go back home. This is your home. You always have a place to come home to. If I always have a place to come home to, why are people always telling me, don't go to Nigeria? Which one is it? Before my dad passed, I was in Nigeria for like almost over a month, I think. And everybody was like, "You're still there," checking on me. "Why are you still there?" Me, I don't stay there for more than 1 week. People who are born and raised are telling me and and I'm just like my mom, the same way she was when people tried to put fear into her when she was in Nigeria. I'm just like, I know the God I serve. I don't have to worry about that. On the other side of that though, Bex, is no one can make me go back but God. I'm not proud right now. I'm not proud to be Nigerian.
Jeez.
I'm not. I'm disappointed.
Ooh.
I am very disappointed.
These are big words.
In Nigeria.
Wow. Wow.
We're too smart for this stuff. We're too smart for this crap. This is why.
This is a very...
Oh, we love God. We're always talking, Jesus, mountain of fire, mountain of fire. What does the Bible say? They talk, but their hearts are far from me.
Yeah. So let's be careful, because this is a very risky conversation that we're having. We're going to have people on all parts of the spectrum.
Sure.
Watching.
Sure.
This conversation.
Sure.
And there are people already that you've offended, I'm sure. People that I might have offended. And it's so important.
This would have offended the old Iyore too.
Yeah, exactly. And there's things that maybe they're harboring that will be offensive to us that are inaccurate. And so I think it's very important to note right now that no matter where you are on the spectrum, it's almost by design that we all be deceived and have and hold these misconceptions. There are things that, based on my journey, you've said, I know people personally who would disagree.
I do too.
There are people, and those same people have preconceived notions about us that are equally, if not more offensive and equally inaccurate.
Sure, which is why I don't care anymore.
And I'm going to allow you, because it's important that you go through your process and feel how you feel and express it, because it's part of the journey to truth. And I'm not going to pretend like I have all the truth. I'm still learning things. But what I will say in response to this idea that because disappointed is a big word. It's one word that I recoil at. Like, I actually usually will walk away from a conversation when someone, I feel like it's a form of gaslighting. But I think I understand what you're saying. And I think what you're saying is important and it's true. It is disappointing. I'm not taking that away at all. Ooh, we are smarter. Yes. But I strongly feel and almost know with a certainty that it is almost completely out of our control. Even in the church.
But what I get,
as such a faith-filled culture and heritage, there is demonic activity even in the church. There are people at high levels in leadership, in government, and in the faith that are actually not real people. This is being orchestrated by a kingdom of darkness.
I agree.
This world belongs to Satan. Satan can literally take hold of, through his devices and through his minions, people, and then perpetuate an entire scheme. So anyone listening who takes offense to anything that you've said has to be very careful to ask themselves, wait, am I adding to the division by not listening through this through a lens of empathy and love and with the heart of God? Am I allowing myself to be influenced by those very dark? Because it starts as simple as that. It starts as simple as just being offended. That's when the enemy now has access.
Being transparent and grieving publicly in this way is not easy. I recognize that I'm not saying all the things that I want to say in the way that I want to say them because I'm angry. But the sentiment remains the same. Yes, we are smart. Yes, we are prayerful, which is why I'm frustrated that we've allowed this to go on for so long. I remember as a little girl sitting in on my dad's meetings, hearing about the change that needed to happen in Nigeria. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but that was over 20 years ago.
And that gets to the pride. What I am saying, let's drop the pride. Let's get to solution. We can beat our chest all day. Pride, pride, pride. Pride comes before the fall.
I think
and we done failed.
That's
we
true.
Need to, it's
pride,
time to.
I dare say, is the quickest way to turn away from God's will. The Bible plainly says it. Pride comes before a fall, but also that it's direct opposition to God. Because when you are prideful, you are taking on the role of God.
Mm-hmm. And we know that there's like a healthy pride in what we're saying, but I think Nigerians take it and it is the negative pride.
There's a healthy pride, but I think our pride is because we know what goes on. And for the sake of the world, for the sake of our image, for the sake of our pride, we have a lot to be proud of, but we also know that there's a lot to not be proud of. And I think anyone that's Nigerian can agree to this, and anyone who is not willing to agree to that is under delusion. And so, for the sake of not allowing people to see us finish, you know that phrase, see finish? Mm-hmm. Not allowing the rest of the world to see us finish. We must boast in the things that we are good at and the things that we can be proud of, so that they don't know that on the back side, in the back door, we got all this stuff scurrying in and out that's really keeping us from being really anything to be proud of.
And what I'm saying is, I'm ready to rip all that off. Rip all that off, because the Bible says everything will come to light, and the sooner you bring it to light, the sooner you can overcome.
And I'm with
Let's rip it off. I'm tired. And proud of what?
And I'm with it.
I'm not proud.
And
because I think this is sad that if I can't come back home and bury my dad in a decent way, what my family doesn't know is that we were held at gunpoint.